When my roommate Kevin and I moved into our new apartment, we were thrilled to have found a spacious place in an old charming building. The apartment had a lot of character with creaky wooden floors and antique fixtures. However, we quickly noticed something strange about the layout. One wall in the living room seemed unusually thick. Kevin, a curious and handy guy, decided to investigate. He tapped on the wall, and it sounded hollow. Intrigued, we decided to open it up, hoping to find some hidden storage space. After removing some of the paneling, we discovered a small hidden door. Excited, we pried it open and found a narrow staircase leading down to a dark basement. The basement was filled with old furniture, boxes of junk, and a thick layer of dust. It seemed like it hadn't been touched in decades. Among the clutter, we found an old ornate mirror and a large trunk. Inside the trunk were old clothes, letters, and photographs from the 1920s. It was like stepping back in time. We were fascinated by our discovery and spent hours exploring the basement. That night, strange things began to happen. I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the living room. I assumed it was Kevin, but when I got up to check, the room was empty. I called out for Kevin, but he was fast asleep in his room. The next morning, we found the hidden door ajar, even though we were sure we had closed it. Kevin laughed it off, saying it was probably just the old building settling. But I felt uneasy. Over the next few days, the disturbances grew. We heard whispers and saw shadows moving in the corners of our eyes. Objects would disappear and reappear in strange places. I started having vivid nightmares of a woman in old-fashioned clothes, standing in the basement, staring at me with hollow eyes. Desperate for answers, we decided to research the building's history. We discovered that it was once owned by a wealthy family in the 1920s. The daughter of the family, Clara, had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Rumors suggested she had been locked away in the basement by her abusive father. One night, I woke up to find the old mirror from the basement in my room, even though we had left it downstairs. The reflection showed the room as it was in the 1920s with Clara standing behind me. I screamed and shattered the mirror. Kevin rushed in, and I told him everything. We decided to seal the basement door and leave the apartment. As we were packing, we found an old letter in the trunk. It was from Clara, begging for help and detailing the abuse she suffered. The final line sent chills down our spines. "He won't let me leave, but I will find a way to escape." We moved out the next day. The landlord was puzzled but didn't question us. Kevin and I never spoke of the incident again, but the memory of Clara's haunting presence stayed with us, a reminder of the dark secrets that old buildings can hide. But my story doesn't end there. Even after moving out, I couldn't shake the feeling of Clara's presence. The nightmares persisted, and I felt constantly watched. I tried to push it out of my mind, but strange things started happening in my new apartment. Doors would creak open on their own, and I'd hear soft sobbing in the middle of the night. One evening, while unpacking a box, I found a piece of broken glass from the shattered mirror. I was sure we had left all that behind, but there it was, shimmering ominously. I felt a cold breeze, and the lights flickered. I heard a whisper, faint but unmistakable, "Help me." Determined to put an end to this haunting, Kevin and I decided to visit a psychic. The psychic, an elderly woman named Madame Lorraine, listened to our story and agreed to help. She performed a seance to communicate with Clara's spirit. During the seance, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. The candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Madame Lorraine closed her eyes and spoke in a voice that wasn't her own. "I am Clara, trapped, afraid. He won't let me go." The room grew colder, and a strong wind blew through, extinguishing the candles. Madame Lorraine gasped and fell silent. When she regained her composure, she told us that Clara's spirit was still trapped, bound to the place of her suffering. We knew what we had to do. We returned to the old apartment building with Madame Lorraine. The landlord was reluctant but allowed us back in when we explained the urgency. The hidden door was still sealed, just as we had left it. We reopened it and descended into the basement once more. Madame Lorraine began a cleansing ritual, chanting softly and lighting incense. As she did, we heard footsteps overhead, growing louder and more frantic. The basement felt suffocating, the air thick with despair. Kevin and I stood close together, hearts pounding. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the basement. The old mirror, which we had left behind, fell from the wall, shattering into countless pieces. Among the shards, we saw a shadowy figure emerge, a spectral form of Clara. Her eyes were hollow, filled with endless sorrow. "I just want to be free," she whispered. Madame Lorraine continued her ritual, and slowly, Clara's figure began to dissolve into light. The basement seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Clara's spirit finally found peace, her whispers fading into silence. We sealed the hidden door one last time and left the apartment feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. The haunting had ended, but the experience had left an indelible mark on our souls. Even now, years later, I sometimes feel a chill and hear a faint whisper in the wind. I remember Clara and the pain she endured, a reminder of the darkness that can linger in forgotten places. I hope she found the peace she deserved and that the shadows of the past can finally rest. Before we get into the next story, if you come for the first time, please make sure to subscribe to a channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories. We need your support. Please share the stories with your friends and family. Thanks. When I moved to the city for my new job, I found a small apartment and a roommate named Tom through a local ad. Tom seemed like a quiet, introverted guy who mostly kept to himself. He worked night shifts at a nearby factory, so I seldom saw him. One evening, I returned home to find the apartment eerily quiet. Tom's door was ajar, and the room was in disarray. Clothes were scattered, and his bed was unmade. Concerned, I called out for Tom, but received no response. I decided to give it some time, assuming Tom would return. Days turned into weeks, and there was no sign of Tom. His bed remained untouched, and his things were left exactly as they were. I reported Tom's disappearance to the landlord and the police, but they found no clues. The rent was paid on time, and there were no signs of foul play. One night, as I was falling asleep, I heard faint whispering coming from Tom's room. It was almost like a low chant. Gathering my courage, I approached the door and listened closely. The whispers grew louder, but when I opened the door, the room was empty and silent. The next day, I decided to search Tom's room for any clues. I found a journal hidden under the mattress. The entries were bizarre, detailing Tom's experiences with a shadowy figure that visited him at night, whispering things I couldn't understand. The final entry was especially chilling. Tom wrote about feeling the presence of the figure closer than ever. He felt it watching him, even during the day. The entry ended abruptly with the words, "It wants me to go with it." Disturbed, I decided to move out immediately. I packed my belongings and left the apartment, never looking back. Weeks later, I learned from the landlord that a new tenant had moved in. However, they too reported strange occurrences and eventually disappeared without a trace. To this day, the apartment remains a mystery. Some say it's cursed, haunted by the shadowy figure that took Tom. I never found out what really happened, but the experience left me with a deep sense of unease, a constant reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. But my story doesn't end there. A few months after moving into my new place, I started to experience odd things. Items would be moved, lights would flicker, and I constantly felt like I was being watched. One night, I woke up to a soft whispering sound. My heart pounded as I recognized the same eerie chant I had heard coming from Tom's room. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination playing tricks on me, but the occurrences became more frequent. I found scratches on my walls and strange symbols drawn in the dust. The whispering grew louder each night, until one evening I saw it. I was lying in bed, struggling to sleep, when I noticed a dark figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was tall and featureless, its presence suffocating. I couldn't move or scream, paralyzed with fear. The figure leaned closer, whispering the same unintelligible words I had heard before. My skin crawled, and a cold sweat drenched my body. The next morning, I found a new entry in Tom's journal, despite it being locked away in a drawer. The handwriting was shaky and barely legible. It read, "It's found you. Run before it's too late." Panic set in. I couldn't understand how the journal had appeared or how the figure had followed me. I knew I had to get rid of it. I packed up the journal and took it to a remote area, burning it and scattering the ashes. I hoped this would end the nightmare. For a while, things seemed to return to normal. The whispers stopped, and I felt a sense of relief. But one night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed a familiar symbol drawn on my bathroom mirror in the fog from my shower. It was the same symbol I had seen in Tom's room and on my walls. I felt a cold presence behind me. Turning slowly, I saw the shadowy figure once again. It seemed even darker and more menacing than before. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent. My mind raced, trying to think of a way to escape. Desperation took over. I fled my apartment, not caring where I went as long as I got away from that thing. I drove aimlessly, ending up at a small motel on the outskirts of town. I checked in, hoping to find some peace. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept all the lights on, my eyes darting around the room, expecting the figure to appear at any moment. Exhaustion eventually claimed me, and I fell into a restless sleep. In my dreams, I saw Tom. He looked terrified, trapped in a dark, endless void. He reached out to me, his eyes pleading for help. I woke up with a start, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. The whispers were gone, but the fear remained. I decided to seek help from a local paranormal expert. They listened to my story and conducted a thorough investigation of my apartment. They confirmed the presence of a malevolent entity drawn to the fear and despair of its victims. With their help, I performed a cleansing ritual, banishing the entity from my life. It was a long and arduous process, but eventually the whispers ceased and the sense of dread lifted. I moved to a new city, hoping to start fresh and leave the nightmare behind. Although I never found out what truly happened to Tom or why the entity targeted us, I learned to be cautious. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some doors should never be opened. Even now, I occasionally feel a chill in the air or catch a glimpse of a shadow out of the corner of my eye. I remind myself that it's all in my head, but deep down I know that some things are never truly gone. When I started college, I was excited to live in the dorms and experience campus life. I shared my room with a girl named Emma, who was friendly and easy to get along with. We quickly became close friends, spending most of our time together. One night, I returned to our dorm after a late study session at the library. I found Emma sitting on her bed, facing the wall. It was unusual for Emma to be so quiet, so I asked if everything was okay. Emma didn't respond or turn around. Assuming Emma was just having a bad day, I decided to give her some space and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to find Emma gone. Her bed was neatly made, and her things were untouched. I thought she had left early for class. Later that day, I saw Emma in the cafeteria and mentioned her strange behavior the previous night. Emma looked confused and said she hadn't been in the dorm at all. She had stayed at a friend's place overnight. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off as a misunderstanding. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing odd things. I would see Emma in places she couldn't possibly be. Once, I saw Emma in the library while knowing she was in class. Another time, I saw her in the hallway, but when I called out, Emma vanished around the corner. One night, I woke up to find Emma standing over my bed, staring down at me with a blank expression. Terrified, I screamed, but Emma didn't move. When I turned on the light, there was no one there. Shaken, I confronted Emma the next day, but she insisted she had been asleep in her own bed. I began to doubt my sanity. I confided in my other friends, but they all said Emma had been acting completely normal. Desperate for answers, I started keeping a journal of the strange events. The more I wrote, the more frequent the occurrences became. One evening, I came back to the dorm to find Emma sitting at her desk, writing in her journal. When I asked what she was doing, Emma looked up with a sinister smile and said, "I'm not Emma." I ran out of the room and went straight to campus security. They searched the dorm but found nothing unusual. Emma was gone and her belongings were missing. The real Emma was later found in her friend's dorm, completely unaware of what had transpired. The university launched an investigation but found no evidence of foul play. I transferred to a different dorm, but the experience haunted me. I never saw Emma's doppelganger again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching and waiting. As I settled into my new dorm, the eerie incidents followed me. Late at night, I would hear faint whispers and feel a chilling presence. One night, I woke up to find a shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed. My heart pounded as I stared, paralyzed with fear. The figure slowly leaned closer and I could see it was Emma, but her eyes were empty, devoid of any life. I screamed and scrambled to turn on the light, but when I did, the figure was gone. The room was empty, yet the sense of dread lingered. The next day, I found a note slipped under my door. It was written in a familiar handwriting, Emma's. It read, "You can't escape me." Panic set in. I knew I had to find a way to rid myself of this malevolent presence. I reached out to a local paranormal expert who agreed to help. They performed a cleansing ritual in my dorm room, trying to banish the spirit that had taken on Emma's form. For a while, the disturbances stopped, and I felt a sense of relief. However, the peace was short-lived. One evening, I was studying in the library when I saw her again. Emma's doppelganger was standing between the bookshelves, watching me with those hollow eyes. I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, but when I turned, no one was there. Desperate, I decided to dig deeper into the history of the dorms. I discovered that several students had reported seeing their doppelgangers before mysteriously disappearing. The stories dated back decades, and no one had ever found a solution. Determined to end this nightmare, I confronted the doppelganger the next time it appeared. In a dark hallway late at night, I saw her again. Gathering all my courage, I demanded to know what it wanted. The doppelganger's smile was chilling as it whispered, "Your soul?" Terrified but resolute, I recited the cleansing ritual the paranormal expert had taught me. The figure screamed and dissolved into darkness, leaving me trembling but victorious. I hoped that was the end of it. Years have passed, and I have since graduated and moved far away from that college. Yet, every now and then, I catch a glimpse of a familiar figure in the corner of my eye, or hear a faint whisper in the night. I remind myself it's just my imagination, but deep down, I know the doppelganger is still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return.